What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Shockwave grenades because they were unvaulted in zero build in yesterday's update, and playing off these correctly could mean the difference between winning the match and getting sent back to the lobby. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below what you think of Shockwave grenades being unvaulted. So if you started playing the game in Chapter 4, you probably haven't used these items ever, but if you played during Chapter 3 zero build, I'm sure you're well aware of how they work because they were kind of the meta for most of Chapter 3 and zero build. It basically sends out a 360-degree blast of energy that forces everything away from it, and the momentum you have before it goes off matters. Like if you're standing still, you're going to get a different trajectory than if you're sprinting and jumping. And then if the shockwave grenade is above you for some reason, you're going to get a different trajectory than if it's below you or just directly behind you. All of these things create different arcs and different trajectories away from the shockwave grenade, and it just takes some playing around with and some getting used to really master these items and understand how to use them. I feel like of all the mobility items, they're definitely one of the more difficult to use because with the katana, I feel like it was very intuitive and very easy. You just kind of looked where you wanted to go. I feel like the swinging mobility items are also very intuitive. The shockwave hammer was a little more difficult to use than the other two, but I feel like shockwaves and using them correctly and kind of mastering them is a lot more difficult than some of these other mobility items. Like I said, it's like a ball of energy outward away from it. So you kind of want it to be opposite the direction you're going. So typically the easiest way to just go forward with these shockwaves is to have it out, look forward or look down as you're walking forward, throw it at your feet, and then continue walking forward the entire time. So by the time it blows up, it'll be behind you, and then you can just keep going. So you just look down, throw it. It'll be behind you by the time it goes off because there is a slight delay, and it's super easy to make that work. It will make you go further if you soaring sprint jump as it blows up. Like I said, it kind of mimics your movement or your already existing momentum. So if you do a soaring sprint jump, you're going to get much further than if you don't do this. And that can be very helpful, but it can also be detrimental because if you do a soaring sprint jump when it goes off at an inopportune time, then you're going to end up going much further than where you want to go. So soaring sprints is good with it, but I feel like soaring sprints jumping every single time with this isn't ideal. It really depends on how far you want to go and what you're trying to do with the shockwave. And if you land in a slide, you'll typically have a much faster slide than what you had beforehand. I'm kind of interested to try a mud slide and shockwaving. So you would have the mud and the shockwave momentum. I think it could be pretty crazy. The easiest way to get used to these items is just going to be creative. I think like most things in Fortnite, creative is just the most optimal way to practice it. You can go into your own island and spawn them, or you could just do a private match of the pit. I'll have the code for it in the description down below, but you can go into this map, select private match before you ready up instead of public match, and then you can be in here by yourself and you can throw shockwaves to your heart's content. And like I said, it's much easier to just practice these things and learn these things in creative than it is an actual game, because an actual game you have to find the shockwaves, and that's another thing that makes them more difficult than something like the katana or the hammer, is it's very limited. You can carry 6 of these as a maximum, and they drop in stacks of 2. So you have to find 3 spawns of it to have 6 shockwaves. That's max per slot. So it's just much more inconvenient or much more difficult to get actual practice with this item in game. Whereas if you found a katana or a shockwave hammer, you could play around with it for the rest of that match and get more used to it. I would just highly recommend going into creative. I kind of explained how it works, but I feel like it's one of those things that's much easier to learn kind of once you have your hands on the item and you kind of can trial and error to figure out what you're doing wrong and what you could be doing better. And I think this would make your life much easier if you just go into creative, take 5 to 10 minutes, if that might be a stretch, to practice with this item and kind of familiarize yourself with it. It's going to save you a lot of time in game, and it's going to save you or spare you from a lot of embarrassing situations in game. So that is just kind of the gist of how you can use shockwaves. There's a lot of things you can do with them, but the basic principle is that it's a blast of energy that goes outward 360 degree from the grenade, depending on where the other player is when it goes off. Practicing creative will be the easiest way for you to get used to it. Another thing that I want to touch on in comparison to the shockwave hammer or the katana that makes this item more difficult to use is the fact that you have a limited amount, and so you don't just want to use them for no reason. Like with the shockwave hammer or the katana, if you wanted to go from point A to point B, you just use your shockwaves or use your hammer, use your katana, it's fine. But with the shockwaves, you don't want to be using them unless there's like a goal behind it typically. Like if you're in storm and you got to get in, you got to do what you got to do. But if you just want to get to somewhere slightly faster for no reason, it's probably not better for using the shockwaves there. And you'd be better off using something like a car or the animals, the launch pads that are around the map, the temples that will rift you, things like that. This will be good for getting around the map, but shockwaves I feel like you want to use more intentionally and more sparingly because you do have a limited amount. And they are pretty inconvenient to get. The spawn rate for them isn't great. One of the best ways I've found to get them is to get the vaults, because the vaults have 2 legendary chests guaranteed, and legendary chests both have double like utility or healing slot items in the chest, and that's where it spawns. So one chest or one vault is like 5 potential chances of shockwaves, and that's like a pretty decent amount compared to some areas. So getting the vaults is nice. Not only did you get, mythic flapjack rifle, you'll get the slurp juice, but also you have a pretty decent chance of getting shockwaves, which is nice. Now I'm going to talk about some of the different things you can do with shockwaves that might not be obvious to some people, because a lot of people just kind of think of it like, I'm going to use it, I'm going to throw it at my feet, I'm going to walk forward, I'm going to push somebody, which is great, but there's also a lot of other things you can do with it. Like if you have somebody playing a position of advantage, like a house or a mountain or any sort of high ground, what you can do is throw a shockwave straight at your feet. You're going to go straight up, and then you can throw more shockwaves at them to force them off of their position of advantage, and it works out incredibly well. And this is something where you won't always want to do this in every single fight, but there's times where this could be very helpful, especially when the game ends on one of these structures, because if you have like a castle in zone and you have somebody playing that castle, fighting them is going to be pretty difficult. But if you shockwave them off of it, not only have you knocked them off of their high ground, but if you're decently late into the game, you're probably going to knock them into the storm as well, which makes it very inconvenient for them to play that fight. They went from being in a position of advantage to being in the storm and taking 10 damage a second. So you can use it to get people off of positions of advantage. You can use it to get people out of bushes. So if somebody's camping in a bush and you throw a shockwave in there, it's going to break the bush and it's going to force them out, which is, once again, this player is probably not going to be prepared for that. If they're camping a bush, they think everything is good and they're fine, but you shockwave them out of the bush, you're forcing them to respond to a situation that they're not prepared for, and it will throw a lot of people off. You can also use it to get people out of cover. If you fry somebody and they go behind a tree or a rock, and they're just like kind of playing right shoulder peek, or anytime anyone's playing right shoulder peek and that's just all they're doing, you can throw a shockwave behind that tree or next to that tree, next to that rock, and if they're in the radius to be affected by it, they'll be forced out of their cover, probably out into the open into no man's land, and it's going to be much easier for you to eliminate them because, once again, you put them in a bad spot and you did so like in a surprising way. A lot of people aren't going to be used to it and they're not going to be able to deal with that easily. You can also use it to get through walls or in and out of buildings. So I said before, if you just throw it flat at your back, you're going to get a different trajectory than if it was under you. And you can use this in buildings surprisingly well. So if you want to go through the floor, you can just look up and throw it at the roof, and then it's going to force you straight down. If you're in a house and you want to go one level over, you can throw it at the wall, and it's going to force you through the wall next to you into the other building. And you can do this to catch a lot of people off guard that are like being ratty or being like overwhelmed, like very passive in certain situations. You can also use it to shockwave teammates if you want to like travel everywhere with somebody. It's kind of hard to get the timing for this right. I feel like you kind of want to bunch up, have everybody kind of walk as slow as they can, like barely touching their movement. That way they get a little bit, but not much. And then you just throw it down and you should all be able to go. This is difficult to coordinate, especially depending on like your teammates and like their awareness of this thing. If you have a bunch of people that understand the way it works, it gets much easier. But if you're playing with randoms or you're playing with people who aren't very good, then shockwaving all of you might be difficult, but it can be very helpful in certain situations. And this does negate fall damage. So if you're up in a high area, you can use this to avoid fall damage. Another thing that's not ideal, but it can save your life, is if you get in just an incredibly awkward fight with somebody and you just want to get them away from you. So I have this clip here where I don't even think I was looking at my screen in this clip. I was reading chat and talking to chat about something. I did not expect a player to be here at all because I thought it was like previously out of bounds or whatever. They completely caught me off guard. And I just shockwave him away from me because like I'm at a damage deficit to open this fight. It's not really going to get better for me. Even if I fight him, it's like a 50-50 fight. Neither of us really have cover. I'm going to have to hit like an incredibly like perfect pump shot to even have a chance at winning this fight. And even then I probably lose it. So I just shockwave him away from me. We'll deal with him later. And we don't have that awkward fight that just like I was not prepared for whatsoever. And there's a lot of times where this maybe could save your life. Like I said, it's not ideal. You don't want to play to make this happen, but it can be very helpful. And in in-game, you can just shockwave people into Storm, which can completely ruin their game. Kind of like I was talking about before, if you have somebody playing high ground, if you have somebody playing the edge of the map or anything, you can just shockwave them into Storm, and it puts them in a terrible situation because the Storm is going to be probably either an 8 or a 10 tech at that point. So their game is like pretty much ruined. They're just going to be like sprinting into zone, and you could just fry them at that point. And even if you don't eliminate them off that, like their game is at pretty much an unrecoverable spot. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful or informative. Like I said, shockwaves, they're a very tricky item to get used to, but I feel like it's one of those things that once you use it and once you get the hang of it, you got it. It's much easier to learn like hands-on than it is in game, as far as like in public matches. So I put the code for the pit down in the description below. You can go in there in a private match. You can also bring your friends in there in that private match, and it'll just be very easy for you to get used to them that way and kind of practice with them. You can just get so much more reps. Like if you're only using them in game in an actual public match, the amount of time it's going to take you to like practice with like 20 shockwaves is going to be a lot, whereas in creative it'll probably be less than like 2 minutes. But if you guys found this helpful, give it a like, subscribe if you like some more. Comment down below what you think of shockwaves returning. Personally, I'm super happy. I think it makes this season a lot more fun in zero build, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.